You dare, he stammered, but his voice wavered. Hela took another step forward, her voice low but laced with power. I dare because I have nothing to fear from men like you. Status, wealth. In the heart of the village of Elara, there was a name that stirred both awe and fear. Hela, a young woman with a fierce spirit, unyielding strength, and a reputation that echoed through every home. To most, she was a mystery, a force of nature who seemed to despise men with every fibre of her being. Hela was known for her striking presence, her unbreakable stance, and her unwavering gaze that could silence any man brave enough to meet it. She moved through Elara like a storm, fierce, untouchable, and feared. She didn't just refuse attention, she actively repelled it. If a man dared to approach her with even a hint of charm or a sly smile, he'd soon find himself nursing a bruise and recounting his defeat, the villagers whispered among themselves. What drives her hatred? They asked, but no one dared voice these thoughts aloud. Hela's silence on the matter only deepened the mystery around her. She spoke little, keeping to herself, yet her actions spoke volumes. Her beauty was undeniable, yet her aura of intimidation was enough to make even the bravest men keep their distance. Men were drawn to Hela despite her fierce demeanour. They saw her as a challenge, a prize that only the strongest or most charming could win. They tried everything, flattery, gifts, even displays of bravery. And yet, each attempt ended the same way. Hela's rejection was swift and unforgiving. She didn't care for sweet words or gifts. She saw through every gesture, every attempt to win her over. To her, it was all an insult. "Hey, Hela, I thought you might like these flowers," he murmured, his voice wavering slightly as he offered the bouquet. Hela's eyes narrowed. She looked at him, her gaze hard and unflinching. "Do you think flowers will change anything?" she asked, her tone icy. Without another word, she took a step forward, forcing him to step back in fear. The young man turned pale, realizing the error in his approach. The flowers fell to the ground as he stammered an apology, retreating as quickly as his legs could carry him. Others watched from afar, chuckling quietly at his failed attempt. They knew Hela wasn't one to be swayed by simple gestures. "She's unlike anyone else," one of them said, shaking his head. "I've never met a woman so untouchable." "Maybe she just needs the right kind of attention," another suggested with a grin. "She's never met someone like me. I'll charm her, you'll see." And so, one by one, they tried. Each man approached Hela with confidence, armed with their best smiles and cleverest lines, only to find themselves bruised and defeated, both physically and emotionally. Hela's strength was unmatched, her resolve unbreakable. But there was one man who believed he could conquer Hela's heart, one who thought his status would shield him from her wrath, the village prince. Confident in his charm and his wealth, he decided to approach Hela, convinced that his lineage and his gifts would win her favour. "Hela," he began with a smile, extending a box adorned with fine jewellery. "A woman as unique as you deserves only the finest. I believe you'll find this gift worthy of your attention." Hela looked at him, unimpressed. She remained silent, her expression hard as she stared at the prince with an intensity that made him shift uncomfortably. He cleared his throat, trying to maintain his composure, but Hela's unwavering gaze was unsettling. "You think jewellery will make me care?" she finally replied, her tone dripping with disdain. The prince chuckled, attempting to mask his unease. "I think it's a start. Surely someone as beautiful as you must have a soft spot." But as soon as the words left his lips, he knew he'd made a mistake. Hela's eyes flashed with anger. Before he could react, she took a swift step forward, her fist connecting with his chest, sending him stumbling back. The prince was stunned, his pride bruised as much as his body. He had never been treated this way, especially by a woman. You dare," he stammered, but his voice wavered. Hela took another step forward, her voice low but laced with power. I dare because I have nothing to fear from men like you. Status, wealth, none of it matters to me." The prince's confidence shattered. Humiliated, he turned and fled, leaving his gift abandoned at Hela's feet. News of his defeat spread through the village like wildfire. People spoke of Hela with a mix of respect and fear, marveling at her strength and her unwillingness to submit to anyone, even royalty. The prince's shame did not go unnoticed by his father, the king. Furious that his son had been humiliated, he decided it was time to confront the woman who had defied his family. He summoned Hela to his throne room, demanding answers for her actions. Hela walked into the room with her head held high, unafraid, even in the presence of the king. The villagers gathered around, whispering among themselves, curious to see how this confrontation would unfold. "Hela," the king began, his voice echoing through the hall. "You have humiliated my son, shamed the royal family. Why do you despise men so much that you would strike even the prince?" For a moment, Hela stood in silence, her expression unreadable. She could feel the weight of the villagers' eyes on her, waiting for her response. But unlike before, when she had only shown strength and defiance, there was a flicker of vulnerability in her gaze. Finally, Hela spoke, her voice softer than anyone had ever heard. "You want to know why I hate men?" she asked, her eyes meeting the king's with a depth of sorrow that silenced the room. She took a shaky breath, her usual composure slipping as memories surfaced, memories she had buried deep, hidden from the world. Her voice trembled as she began to speak, and for the first time the villagers saw not just a warrior, but a woman shaped by pain and loss. "Because I watched my father torment my mother. Day after day, I saw him treat her as nothing, taking her spirit piece by piece, and just when I thought it couldn't get worse," Hela's voice broke, her hand raising to cover her mouth as she struggled to continue. "He took the life of my unborn brother. He struck her so hard that she lost everything. And then he took her life too." The villagers stood in stunned silence. For so long, they had only seen Hela as a figure of fear, a woman who rejected every man, who seemed filled with anger and spite. But now they understood. Behind her strength was a story of survival, of a child who had lost everything and built walls so high that no one could breach them. The king sat back, his expression softening as he processed Hela's words. He had summoned her to demand answers, but what he had received was a painful truth that changed everything. In that moment, he saw Hela not as a rebellious young woman, but as someone who had endured unimaginable suffering and chose strength over submission. As Hela's last words faded into the quiet of the throne room, a profound silence settled over the crowd. Her pain, shared openly for the first time, created a heaviness in the air that left everyone speechless. The villagers, who had once gossiped about her with fear and judgment, now stood rooted in place, overwhelmed by a wave of empathy they hadn't expected. Hela's story had transformed her in their eyes. She was no longer a figure to be feared, but one to be understood. For years, they had only seen her defiance, her strength, and her anger. But now, they realized that beneath that armor was a woman who had borne unimaginable suffering. She was not a force of chaos or cruelty, as they had once thought, but a survivor. Her hatred, once thought to be unfounded, was suddenly justified in their eyes, and her fierce independence was seen for what it truly was, a shield to protect a wounded heart. "Hela, my dear," the woman murmured, her voice trembling with emotion. "We never knew. We never understood." She gently touched Hela's hand, a simple gesture, but one filled with a lifetime of empathy. Hela looked at the woman, her own defenses crumbling under the weight of such an honest, compassionate touch. For so long, she had kept herself distant, believing that no one would or could understand her pain. But now, as she looked into the eyes of her fellow villagers, she saw a reflection of her own grief and struggles mirrored back at her. The king, who had initially summoned Hela out of anger, now sat back on his throne, humbled and contemplative. Her story had struck him in a way he hadn't anticipated. He realized that he, too, had misjudged her, viewing her defiance as disrespect rather than as a consequence of deep-seated trauma. His tone softened as he addressed her once more. "Hayla," he began, his voice resonating with a newfound respect. "You have endured more than any one person should. You have shown us all a strength that goes beyond what we can see. Today we have learned that true courage isn't just in facing others, but in surviving oneself." Hayla nodded, meeting the king's gaze with a hint of gratitude. In that moment, an unspoken understanding passed between them, a recognition of her resilience and the painful path that had led her here. The king's words echoed through the hall, touching each person present. Moved by Hela's story, several women from the village stepped forward. They gathered around her, offering their silent support. Each of them held their own stories, their own hidden sorrows and battles fought in silence. And in Hela, they saw a reflection of their own strength, their own resilience. One of the women, Amma, who was well respected in the village, looked at Hela with tear-filled eyes. "We may not have suffered exactly as you have, Hela, but we have known pain. We understand your anger, your need to protect yourself." She took Hela's hands in her own, a gesture of solidarity and unity. The other women nodded, their expressions resolute. In Hela, they saw a hero, someone who had dared to defy convention, to stand against the wrongs done to her, and to confront her pain head-on. She was the voice they had never had, the strength they had been too afraid to show. The village of Ilara would never be the same. Hela's story began to spread, and with it, a shift in perspective. No longer was she seen as a woman to be feared. Instead, she became a symbol of resilience and courage. People spoke of her with respect, and her actions took on new meaning as her pain became known. Children listened intently as elders shared Hela's story, and mothers told their daughters about the strength it took to survive, to heal, and to stand tall in the face of suffering. Hela's defiance was no longer seen as anger. It was a testament to the strength of her heart. "She is the strongest woman in the village," one child whispered to another. "She's like a warrior." The prince, who had once tried to win Hela over with gifts and flattery, now felt a pang of guilt. His arrogance and pride had blinded him to her truth. Humbled by the weight of her story, he realized how shallow his attempts had been and how little he understood about true strength. One evening, he decided to visit Hela, not as a prince but as a man seeking redemption. He approached her home with humility, hoping that his sincerity would convey what words could not. Hela opened the door, her expression unreadable as she looked at him. He met her gaze, his voice quiet and sincere. "Hela, I came to apologize," he began. "I came to you with pride and entitlement, not understanding the strength you possess. Your story has humbled me. You have shown us all what true courage is." Hela studied him for a moment, then gave a slight nod. For once, she saw not a prince but a young man willing to acknowledge his flaws. Although words were not exchanged, there was a silent understanding between them, a respect that went beyond titles and status. Inspired by Hela's courage, the king made a declaration to the village. From that day forward, every woman in Ilara would be treated with respect and dignity. The villagers were encouraged to honor the strength of women, to understand their struggles, and to create a community built on compassion. From this day on, let no woman be treated with anything less than respect. Let their strength be acknowledged, their pain understood, and their courage celebrated, the king proclaimed. The villagers erupted in applause, the sound of their unity echoing through Ilara. Hela had transformed the village, not only through her story, but through her unbreakable spirit. She had opened the eyes of her people, allowing them to see that true strength often hides behind scars and silence. As the days turned to weeks, Hela found herself slowly letting go of the anger that had once fueled her. Her heart, once hardened by grief, began to soften, knowing she no longer had to carry the weight of her past alone. The villagers, who had once seen her as an outcast, now welcomed her as one of their own, respecting her strength and her story. Surrounded by her community, Hela felt something she hadn't in years, a sense of belonging. The walls she had built around her heart were not entirely gone, but they had softened, allowing a glimmer of hope and connection to enter. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of healing, of peace, and of love. And so, Hela became a legend in Ilara, a tale told to remind people of the resilience of the human spirit, the importance of compassion, and the power of understanding. Her journey from pain to strength inspired generations, a story that would live on long after she was gone. With her past revealed and the villagers' empathy awakened, Hela's life in Ilara took on a new light. For the first time, she felt a sense of acceptance and understanding from the people around her. The stories of her strength, once told with fear and caution, transformed into tales of resilience and admiration. Parents shared her journey with their children, elders recounted her strength to younger generations, and she became a symbol of hope for those who struggled in silence. "Remember, children," the elder said, his voice carrying the weight of wisdom. "Strength doesn't always come from a sword or a spear. Sometimes it comes from a heart that has been broken, healed, and beaten again, yet still chooses to stand." The children's eyes were wide with wonder. To them, Hela was not just a villager, but a legend, a hero who had endured unspeakable pain and emerged stronger. Hela's story resonated beyond her own experiences, inspiring countless others in the village to open up about their struggles, to find strength in vulnerability. One evening, as Hela was sitting outside her home, a familiar figure approached her, the prince. His face bore a sincerity she hadn't seen before, free of the arrogance he once wore. He stood before her, silent for a moment, gathering his thoughts before speaking. "Hela," he began, his voice steady but laced with regret. "I came here not as a prince, but as a man seeking forgiveness. I once thought my title would grant me everything. I was wrong. You have taught me that respect is not a privilege, but something earned." Hela studied him, her expression thoughtful. She had never imagined this moment, never expected him to return with humility. But she could see that his words were genuine. "Your apology is accepted," she replied quietly, "but know that it's not forgiveness that binds us now. It's understanding." The prince nodded, a faint smile of relief on his face. In that moment, an unspoken bond formed between them, built not on romance or obligation, but mutual respect. They were two people who had both grown, shaped by a story that went beyond status or privilege. Word of Hela's forgiveness reached the king, who was moved by the transformation not only in his son but in the village as a whole. Recognizing the impact Hela had on his people, he called a gathering in the village square to make a proclamation. "From this day forward," he announced, his voice strong and unwavering, "we will honor the strength of our women, the stories they carry, and the pain they have endured. Hela has shown us that true courage is not in power, but in resilience. Let her story be a lesson for us all." The crowd erupted in applause, the cheers filling the air as the king looked down at Hela with admiration. She stood among the crowd, humbled and grateful, realizing that her journey had not only transformed her, but her entire community. The king's proclamation marked a shift in Ilara, a turning point where respect and empathy replaced judgment and fear. For the first time, the women of the village felt seen, valued for their strength and endurance. With the support of her village, Hela began to see her life through a new lens. She no longer felt the need to hide behind walls of anger and defiance. Instead, she channeled her energy into something meaningful, helping other women find their voices and their strength. "We've all faced pain in different forms," Hela told them, her voice calm but resolute. "But pain doesn't have to define us. We can choose what we become from it. We can be warriors in our own lives." The women nodded, many of them holding back tears. In Hela, they saw a leader, a sister, and a friend. They shared their own stories, once kept hidden, now spoken aloud in a space of trust and solidarity. The bond between them grew, and soon these gatherings became a ritual, a time for women to share, heal, and strengthen each other. Hela's influence wasn't limited to the women. The men of Elara also began to see her as a teacher. They watched as she led the women with grace and resilience, and many felt inspired to make changes within themselves. Some of the younger men even approached her, asking how they could support the women in their lives. One young man spoke up, "Hela, we want to understand. How can we be better sons, brothers, and husbands?" Hela looked at them, her heart softened by their sincerity. "The first step," she replied, "is to listen. Understand that strength isn't in dominance or control, but in compassion and respect." The men nodded, taking her words to heart. Over time, they worked to create a village where respect was not just an expectation, but a practice. They supported their mothers, sisters, and wives, and in doing so, they strengthened the bonds of their community. As the years passed, Hela's heart began to soften in ways she never anticipated. She had lived a life defined by loss and pain, but with each passing day, she found herself feeling more whole. The village's respect, the women's solidarity, and the men's transformation filled her with a sense of belonging she had never known. She even began to open herself to the idea of companionship. Though she had once sworn off men entirely, she found that forgiveness had made room in her heart for trust and kindness. She met a man who understood her past, who valued her strength, and who never sought to change or control her. "I never thought I'd feel this way," Hela admitted, a smile playing at her lips. "But life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it." Her companion nodded, taking her hand gently. "You deserve happiness, Hela. After everything you've endured, you deserve to find peace." For the first time, Hela allowed herself to believe those words. She had spent so long in battle, with her past, with her pain, with the expectations of others. But now she was finally free to live for herself, to embrace the happiness she had fought so hard to protect. As Hela grew older, her story became part of the village's history, a legend told to every new generation. Parents shared her tale with their children, teaching them the values of resilience, empathy, and respect. Hela's journey became a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, strength could be found. Hela taught us that strength is not in anger or revenge, but in healing and forgiveness, the elder said, his voice filled with reverence. She changed this village, and because of her, we are a better people. The children listened intently, their eyes wide with admiration. To them, Hela was not just a part of their history, but a symbol of what they could become. Years later, as Hela sat at the edge of the village, watching the sun set over the fields, she felt a deep sense of peace. Her life had been a journey she could never have imagined, filled with pain, growth, and transformation. She had found healing not only for herself, but for her entire village. As the last rays of sunlight bathed her in a golden glow, she closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of everything she had built, everything she had become. She was no longer the girl defined by hatred and loss. She was Hela, the woman who had survived, who had forgiven, and who had finally found peace. And as the village of Elara carried on, her story lived in the hearts of its people, a testament to the power of resilience, understanding, and the unbreakable spirit of one extraordinary woman.